thank you again for your presentations. We can now start mapping and tracing the likenesses and differences of these presented exhibition practices. And I already ask everyone in the audience to also prepare your questions and burning comments as we cut a bit of the discussion time. So first come, first served. And I will try to keep my one corner of the eye for your hands. So feel free to step in. In the context of exhibitions, it's always about politics. And there are many different politics involved, as we heard from your presentations as well. So maybe we can start on your each own comments on one of these specific politics of display, the actual physical materiality of the exhibitions or formats that you presented, because I think when speaking about exhibitions, which are very physical, time and space-based events as well as entities, the politics of display is often kind of forgotten about, or the last thing to come in mind in retrospect, because as we step in to an exhibition or as we organize and build one, the physicality and the limits of time and space are the main issues that most of us deal with or are inspired and inspired by. But do you feel that in this specific time and space that you were addressing today, the questions of display and the design of these exhibitions, is there any common grounds that you could point out, or maybe specific also differences in approach of this very different exhibition formats?
Actually, it's really very interesting and provocative at the same time question, because I would like to have been in that 1968 exhibition, for example, and visited myself, and I could have my own physical emotions, ideas and feelings, how it worked. And now actually I could only rely on these archival photos, interviews, just short messages and emotions only seen by others. But what I thought may be important, and maybe there was not enough time to talk about in the presentation, but actually the very important part was given to those especially created objects, especially for that particular exhibition. And that was actually done by the specifically commissioned artists, and usually they were the very promising ones, the avant-garde ones, the modernist ones. The names could be named like the one from Lithuania, that's Valaitis. And actually, again, it's not enough information for me to talk about, for example, the Estonian pavilion or other ones, but they were really, I mean, or I mentioned Valaitis, and again, that was that stained glass piece from Lithuania that was very, very emotional. The kinetic installation, 8 meters high, we can imagine it could stand here, and it was with music. So it was really all these physical emotions. So you can imagine that all those propagandic figures, even if they were, so they were already, how to say, muted because of the electro-acoustic music composed by Lithuanian young composer Feliksas Bajoras at that time. So it means that actually this was very important physically objects, but we can only imagine. I mean, they never came from these exhibitions. So that's just a short thoughts from my mind.
I'm in a way in darkness because actually I think that I showed you all my pictures, all my photographs I have today. So I really miss them. But as I a little bit addressed this situation that the more energy we put into the organizing and the display, the more energy is somehow drying away from this innovativeness and maybe this really from the pictures. And it certainly is super important. And I think that, okay, this is just my interpretation, but I'm quite sure that this really unified display and design of the exhibition of Tallinn print triennials was in a way, how to say, guilty, that this exhibition so soon started to look like really stagnated in a way. And yeah, it's a question of institutionalization anyway, but design might do it as well. Yeah. A little bit dirtiness is always good, I guess. But yeah, I lack pictures to really to analyze it more. Maybe the first one was a little bit more playful, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, also I only have some photos from the Vilnius painting triennial and no one from this youth exhibition. So I don't know how actually wonderful these painting triennials might have been. And as they were different, each country really designed their own exposition. So it would have been quite interesting to see if the principles are the same or not. Or yeah.
Well, I cannot comment about politics of display because I didn't see any photo of the exhibition of 14 Estonian architects in Riga, as it's always the things which are reproduced as these separate architectural boards with works of individual architects or artists. But regarding this political context, I can say that it certainly was there, and it's actually very interesting how at this point, in 1978, there is somehow this conflation or this very rich entanglement of different political agencies which stand behind each of these exhibitions I showed, and which basically try to deal with this mounting crisis of the Soviet modernism and the situation in the public space in the blockhouse district. So I think the reason why exhibition of Estonian architects was brought to Riga, it was because there was interest in articulating this new language, how to speak about these problems from the Architects Union leadership, apparently. I still don't know who was the main person behind this decision. Then there is also on very official levels, there is a will to address these problems through the exhibition of 2 Our City, which is official exhibition launched by the Riga City Council involving 115 participants. And then, of course, there is agency by the associated artists, for example, by the designers like Jānis Borgs and Valdis Cāms, who want to promote their project. And to promote their projects, they want to promote also work of Estonian architects so that they kind of can speak about this avant-garde language of art as something contemporary and extending the borders of Latvia and kind of bringing actuality to these themes. So there's a lot of agencies from different parts, and at the same time, the architects from the young architect sections, they want to talk about heritage and against this these missing solutions for the regional architecture and disappearing individualism in the regional architecture. So it's another agency from another side. So it's like a big knot of different political ideas and strategies behind why exhibitions are there and why they are written about.
Yeah, you pointed out you all did in a way a very important issue when talking and thinking about exhibitions of the past. The traces are really fragmented, and we can't experience the physicality of them, and even the exhibitions we have visited and remember, they are still voices, and we are amongst those voices then. And continuing on this question of voices and participants, the personal relations or the personal relations of the agents in these cases. I think, Kädi, you mentioned no names or barely any. Maybe we could start with you then.
So I'm starting naming names. These triennial start from personal relations, from personal friendships, and I think yesterday it was maybe Tom Scanchis who mentioned these creative houses for young people, Salatskriva, Palanga, Chases and others. From the early 60s already, Baltic artists really meet quite frequently, each summer, I guess. And the other similar platforms as well. This competition is in the air in the Soviet Union, and actually these academies and art institutes do have these sport competitions, which build up also friendships, and it is initiated really by friendships. And these friendships keep on, but somehow I don't see that. Okay, it's really difficult to maybe compare the pictures, right? And to follow these influences and maybe, I don't know, inspirations, but, and I know that, of course, when they met, they spoke about art and so on, but I don't think that at least these triennials somehow inspired they inspired each other with their art, not so much probably. But again, persons are important, personal relations are important, and these triennials were not was initiated from above, but from below. I think it's also very kind of telling. I don't know, was it the answer you wanted? No names.
Thank you. But I think, to continue from there, the kind of, I think, one of the easy juxtapositions of personal and institutional, or the official and kind of unofficial kitchen discussions or sport events versus the big pavilions somewhere. I think it's really interesting how we saw in these cases of the concurrent or coexistence of this really personal and really official and even state representative examples. So Karolina, the personal in your examples.
Yeah, personal I already mentioned, but actually, the audience question is very, difficult in my cases, because these were really propagandic shows, and I mean, to whom you are addressing, it's really, you don't, while thinking about the pavilions in London, you haven't never been abroad in general, I mean, and now you are trying, so whom you are addressing. So maybe I am thinking that they were just trying to do their best. I mean, that was a chance to propose the most ambitious projects, to invite the most ambitious artists in the teams. And actually, maybe that was the case, that they were trying to do something for for the colleagues, I mean, even among the Baltic countries, I mean, they were trying to, what would be the opinion of Velo towards the exhibition design of Tadas, something like that, the dialogue in between, because, I mean, try to think that someone important would come from London audience or context, that's like too utopian. Of course it happened, but it happened by accident, so this is really, I mean, complicated question. But even in that particular cases, I think that was very important, that emotional and very, how to say, artistic message, as I said already, transmitted through those especially created, designed objects. So even I was thinking about such a message that actually design was in the hands of artists, that was not in the hands of the designers. I mean, the most important message was transmitted through those artistically created objects, not through the logos, through the posters, through the objects were shown there, not through the chairs, etc., because that was the exhibitions with completely different, how to say, manner we are used now, that we can sit, we can use, we can touch, we can try, we can smell. That was everything, I mean, untouchable, etc. So, but that's another physicalities we can just imagine.
And Māra, you mentioned that also the exchange of that specific exhibition was actually a result of an ongoing friendship or relation already.
Yeah, the way it was reviewed in Riga, or the way it was publicized or communicated to the audience in Riga, it was a result of the friendship, of course. Yes, so it's a lot of interpersonal relationships, but also in all these fields you see how there's like from bottom to up, you know, so how these like interpersonal networks and connections, they manage to somehow penetrate and dissolve this general ideological line and find these like spaces for free expression or for introducing some innovative ideas and so on. So that's very obvious. Also, the issue attached in my talk, this missing collaboration between artists and architects, and of course there were some interpersonal contacts also in Latvia where on occasion of exhibitions of young architects they would collaborate, but those were against the friendship ties, you know, there was no official organization or no official institution, neither in education nor professional one who would bring them together, but through the friendships they could develop these kind of new strands of these experimental proposals of young architects, for example.
Yeah, before yes, thank you. I saw two hands already, and Tia will come to, or Eda. Yeah. Dear friends, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very interesting and quite close to my interests, so I was very attentively listening. I wanted to say to Māra's, actually as a comment to Maria's question to Māra about the materiality and exhibition design. So what was, I think, significant about this 14 architects exhibition was that they used the 1 by 1 meter display, which was the typical, in the 70s, the typical Soviet time architecture offices display board, which they could acquire through the workplace. So they, in a way, appropriated this very official format for this critical media. And I think for our city exhibition, also the Argalis couple, Maris and Argale, they also used the 1 meter by 1 meter for this critical display. So there was, you know, not only personal relations, but there was this, again, this infrastructure, the Soviet time, so the professional infrastructure on which it was based, at the same time being critical of it. So, you know, there's this very interesting intertwining of this official and unofficial, if you want it to be. And I also, you yesterday asked me about this Borgs-Lapin relationship. I remembered later that Borgs had visited, there's a sign of Borgs in the guest book in Tallinn. So he had been in the show here, and I think this Borgslapin relationship is very strongly behind, bringing it to Riga. And I also haven't found any images, but wasn't it true that the architect's house was in a church, in a former church?
No, it's in the house of the architect, it's in the old town, where they have a separate building with exhibition hall. It's not church.
Okay, so the church exhibition was a different one, and later...
The church was to our city, yes, it was a large-scale show, and the architect's house is another venue.
Okay.
Which, with a separate.
But the Our City exhibition was in a church, in a former church, so it actually has this very interesting connotation, I think. Also, I think,
which was actually later transformed in the Center of Monumental Propaganda or something like that. This church space was renamed, but I think it was later in the 1980s.
But have you found any images of that show?
Of To Our City? Possibly it is doable. I'm too recently on this research, so I just took some images from the press which were available, but I don't have the general. But I guess also the images, official ones in press, they are images of the opening, where you see someone standing between the boards of the. But possibly, yes, if I continue to research in this direction, then it's possible to find them.
Yeah. So, thank you.
But regarding Borg's involvement, I asked him if he was participating in bringing this exhibition of 14 Estonian architects to Riga, and he said no. So we don't know who else was behind.
Hello. So I will continue a little bit, sort of also giving my opinion on Maria-Kristiina's question about the politics of display. So everybody probably noticed that one of the political aspects visible in most exhibitions, maybe not the ones that Māra was talking about, is that all the three Baltic republics, as we called them at that time, were shown separately. We didn't have triennials or industrial exhibitions, let's say thematically divided, right? Portrait, landscape, where, the countries would be mixed. So that also is somehow telling about how the Baltic space was conceived, rather on this competitive and different identity highlighting principle. No, I think that's important, because I remember very well when we staged an exhibition with Kai and Iliana, which was called Modernization at the National Gallery. So all the journalists would be asking, so which of the lanes is Lithuanian? I said, there's no Lithuanian lane, because there were avenues like in the exhibition. These are Baltic lanes, but that's on private space, on public space, because it became a stereotype, that you show Baltic countries on different alleys. So that's one thing. And then it's a little bit to Kädi. Kädi, do you think it is important to have in mind how the selection procedure for the Baltic triennials operated? Because now when we are used, to curatorial choices, to, let's say, artists' own choices, small communities making choices. So I think when one speaks about Baltic triennials, maybe it's interesting to trace whether it changed or it always was the same as I imagine it has been. So could you give your comment on that?
Yeah, is it working there? It's a great problem actually in my research that almost anybody remembers how the selection was made. It's somehow happened. And of course archive documents also don't indicate this. I know that there was only one pre-exhibition in Tallinn for this Vilnius painting triennial in 1978. And so one can see the list of his exponents and later the selection. And I know also that in Vilnius, it was probably a similar year, maybe the next triennial, they had this pre-exhibition in Kaunas, and actually these officials intervened, and this triennial had to be postponed to the I don't know, in the end of to the end of the year, because we wanted to really to censor out quite of many works, but it never happened when they didn't have this pre-exhibition. But I am in trouble because I really, the people who I have been speaking with, they can't remember really. And it seems that maybe these print triennials, they just had this, this experimental studio, and probably this information was spread from there, and just everybody brought their works, and then the jury made the selection. But it's really hard to really specify that. What do you mean? Mm-hmm.
What I had in mind is something which is related to, let's say, late 80s, when I already stepped into the life of art critic. So to generalize it, what I wanted to tell is that these were the juries made by the official artist unions. So personal relations also existed there, but the juries were official artist union representatives. So in the late Soviet period, in the 80s, that was already a big trouble, a real trouble, I don't know how that functioned in the 60s, but I think one still has to have in mind that the selection procedure went through official jury of the artists union, which was a very, very controlled body. Maybe this wasn't the case with, the Tallinn print triennial, but with Vilnius painting triennial, certainly this was the case.
Yeah, and actually there are differences between Tallinn and Vilnius during the Soviet era. In Tallinn, actually, it was a little bit, the situation was smoother a little bit, and actually also this exhibition committee and jury included many just artists. Not only these officials from the Artists Union and Ministry of Culture, but we really are different in Vilnius and Tallinn, at least in 70s and 80s. Yeah. But as I said, I can't answer that at the moment because I don't have this. Of course, you're right, sure, but.
I see a question or Ingrid.
I had a small comment to Karolina's talk, which reminded me a subject that I think has not been researched yet, about not the Baltic, but the all Soviet industrial design exhibitions that were happening in the 70s and 80s. And they had a massive Baltic content. And many of these were designed by Talvoja, who I believe he also was responsible for choosing some of the objects. And these were in various and very exotic places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and I don't know, Turkey, Venezuela, and well, like everywhere around the world. But what I was thinking about was that he told how, for some reason, he was sent to that place for all the duration of the exhibition. So he set it up, and he somehow, just stayed for several months in these countries to oversee that everything is okay, which means that to an extent he also got to see about the reception of how it was. So I think it might be a very interesting thing to research.
Thank you for the comment. Yeah, actually they were also, it's an interesting thing that even, for example, according to the interviews to Baginskas, so he was also saying that he even designed the pavilion in the way that only he could manage to do it in the space. I mean, that he was not doing the pavilion that somebody else could construct. I mean, that he wanted to visit himself and to be responsible and to see how it works or not. Yeah, but actually concerning the how it was attended, it's a longer, actually, you have to to analyze and try to find the visitors who attended, and not only the press reviews, etc., etc. Yeah, but yeah, thank you.
I see a question, Kai.
Yes, thank you. I also wanted to comment then on Ingrid's comment, but the importance of the designer in the whole process, who also definitely had this thing to say also about the content. I'm not sure about the triennials where there was a jury, but I was just recently reading the like memoirs of one of the interior designers or designers who was designing a lot of exhibitions, stating also that yes, she was constantly fighting also to organize the pile that she was given. So it's the way of organizing the whole thing was very often given to the designers to put in place or to have some sense in it. But as it goes with Taivo Kans and many of his generation, it of course meant also that one good exhibition would mean the next commission, and this was in a way way of living also in the system of the I don't know, the art products factories department of design who took care of most of the also the international exhibitions. But I think yes, the role of exhibition designer is also super important. In many cases, sadly, super important.
Any comments? I see one question from Yeva, and unless there is very burning issues, this might be the last one in this panel. But raise your hands if you have any more.
Yeah, I also wanted to, in a way, ask the question, but also a little bit comment on, a small comment on Māra's presentation. It's really very interesting how you bring this, the Estonian exhibition in the picture of Latvian art scene. And I think it's really important because this end of 70s, especially 78, 79, is a very vivid moment in Latvian art scene. You mentioned, or you were analyzing more exhibitions related to architecture, design, but also the synthesis idea, which of course was very much present in visual arts as well. And in a way, this definitely exhibition by Estonian architects is essential in that panorama, if we could say so. But at the same time, it's like this, that this criticism in the public space is appearing through the exhibitions. And so you were analyzing Borg's article, and I think it is important that actually the Borg's article caused the scandal, not so much exhibition itself, but the publication about it caused the scandal. And in a way, as I mentioned yesterday, that he was himself protected, so the scandal kind of was happening, but was not affecting himself. But the editor of cultural section of the newspaper was fired after that article. And but on the other hand, it's that there's a lot of other exhibitions. You mentioned this for our city and the geneticist exhibitions, and this, I would say that this really it's like a row of exhibitions which continue this critical perspective of public space. And it's also very interesting that you, in your presentation, you also mentioned these exhibitions later, which is already, we could say that there's a generational shift happening, but they kind of cause some effect. And that, more like a question to you, how do you see indeed the role of exhibitions as kind of this public voice in this critical mass of critical perspectives, which is not just in a public space, but also like becoming part of official scene, if you could say so?
Well, what was the effect of the exhibitions you are asking?
More like the role, but the exhibitions had a critical role.
Well, I think one of the biggest effect and lasting effects, it was this establishing of the exhibitions of experimental projects of young architects, because it was really something which continued until 87 or 89. and which gave this, which kind of reformatted a little bit the way how the works of young architects have been shown and brought attention to critical issues. This first exhibition in 1979, it was probably the most polemical one, and it most directly addressed this state of the heritage and necessity of presentation of the regional heritage and regional architectural forms, but afterwards they kind of mainly got more decorative function, or not decorative, but maybe just the submissions became more illustrative to the general exhibition theme. In terms of, I don't know, I think it's really this, as you say, it is this moment of activation of this narrative about like mass housing buildings, about the state of the public space, about the state of the environment, and so on. But afterwards, I think that after the 78, 79, they somehow disperse these discourses because they just don't manage to resolve them infrastructurally. You know, the architects do not continue cooperation with designers really, or the designers are never invited to the exhibitions of experimental projects of young architects. So somehow all these debates are steered, but then they are continued separately in different fields, like kineticists are trying to promote further the kineticists' work, and then architects are more occupied with the architectural problems, which also then becomes stronger with this employment of the postmodernist tools. So I think that it's kind of disperses in different domains, this one impulse which is somehow united in this 78, 79. I don't know if it answers.
Yeah, thank you. There's still much food for thought on what is being or what was being done with exhibitions, but we break for lunch now, and if you eat fast, you can go upstairs and see what the exhibitions do to you, as we are in a museum after all. Thank you for your really interesting remarks and comments, and thank you all for your inspirational talks, and good luck.